Hello there guys, Lazybeast here today with one question to answer. Why tank mythics in World of Warcraft? Mainly aiming this question to those in a pug environment using the LFG tool to form groups. If you're doing a Mythic Plus dungeon and you get a good tank in your group, then the run can be so smooth and pleasant to do, and it's really enjoyable. But if unfortunately on the other hand you've got a bad tank, then the run can be an absolute nightmare and your chances of timing that key can go straight out the window. Now I'm sure most of you will have been sat there as a healer or DPS in the queue, waiting upwards to an hour for a tank, getting really frustrated thinking where are all the tanks, and why is no one tanking? Well, that's pretty obvious as to why people don't tank. Tanking can be very stressful at times, and maybe not as stressful as healing, when your group's playing poorly, but it can be probably the second most stressful role in the game, because there's a lot of pressure on your shoulders as the tank. Now you need to know the routes. People will flame you for making mistakes, as they will anybody, but mistakes on the tank can be a lot more impactful on the run, particularly things like messing up the route. If you mess up the route with affixes such as Prideful, or the seasonal affix that we had at the end of BFA with the N'Zoth portals, then you can really mess up the entire key. So that's 8 dungeons that you need to know like the back of your hand. You need to know the routes through them. You also need to know optional different routes if your group has got someone that can make your skips accessible, and if you don't, you need to know the route for that as well. So there's a lot you need to know as a tank running Mythics. You could also argue that tanking just isn't as fun. It's fun being a DPS when you can just blow up the things and all you're bothered about is smashing out as many numbers as possible and enjoying your rotation, that sort of stuff. As a tank, sometimes you do need to make up for the shortcomings of your group members. And as a tank, you're sort of the daddy of the group. You're leading everyone through. The healer is the mother of the group. The healer's looking after you all. You're making sure everyone's on the right path and that everything's going smoothly. You're fighting what you should be fighting. And yeah, if you've got a group that's not very good, it can be a hell of a drag sometimes. But enough of the negativity. Let's talk about why you should tank in LFG and the reasons for doing it. So the most obvious reason straight off the bat is that you're more in demand. There's less tanks in the game. There's arguably more healers than there is tanks in the game, and obviously there's a vast majority more DPS players than there are tanks, so you're a lot more in demand. You have a much easier time finding groups. Now, even if your raid at IO score is quite low as a tank, if you've maybe slacked off a little bit like me, and you've not got your Keystone Master, sometimes if if your eye level is decent enough, and you apply to a group that's needing a tank that's got loads of really high scoring players in there, they may still invite you even though your IO score doesn't match theirs if they've been waiting there ages for a tank. So it's easier to find groups. Another reason is that more control is in your hands. Now this, for some people, will love this and others will hate this, but as a tank, you are the leader of the group. So if you know your stuff and if you play well, then you're a massive factor in the success of timing a key. Now if you've ever played a tank and then gone on one of your other characters or just changed spec and gone DPS or healer and then got into a group with a bad tank, you just know how frustrating this can be. Now people love a good tank, and this leads us on to our third point of why it's good to tank. If you do well, people will want to run with you again, so it can be quite common for people to want to add you and then invite you to runs again in the future when they need a tank next time. Therefore, you end up with a more solid, reliable base of players that can also, do well in the keys, and it just leads to a nice, friendly, good relationship. Now, another reason to tank is that it's quite a good learning experience. So, as a tank, like we mentioned, you kind of need to know the ins and outs of every single dungeon. Now, this is true for everybody, but like a DPS can sometimes get away with not having to think about things such as certain affixes that require placement of things like Sanguine or things like Raging, for example. If they don't have a Soothe or a Slow or anything to help you kite, then they literally just don't need to think about it. So if you're playing as a tank and you're actively thinking about all these things in the key, the route, the affixes, the mechanics of every boss and every trash mob and knowing how to counter them all, then when you then go and play a healer or DPS, if you ever do change spec, then you're going to have much more knowledge potentially than someone else that's not had to think about those things. So all in all, you just end up a better, more well-rounded player when it comes to Mythic Plus dungeons. And then you can ask the question, this is a game, we play this game for fun, so is tanking fun? Well, obviously that depends on your personal preferences and what you actually enjoy in the game. But personally, I would definitely argue that tanking is actually quite fun. So doing huge pulls if your class allows it, and setting up your group for huge AoE and things does feel really satisfying. And you can also get some clutch plays in sometimes where you're the last man standing and you can finish off the last few percentage of a boss using your tankiness all by yourself. Or you can keep a pack aggroed and things, but under control long enough for your group to run back and avoid it resetting. Now obviously you try and avoid situations like that from happening, but when they do happen, you're pretty well rounded, depending on your kit as a tank, what class you play, to survive in those situations. Tank classes do have some nice, fun, unique things about them. So, for example, I'm a Guardian Druid and I play Night Fae, so I have the option to go with the Heart of the Wild talent, and then when it's safe and possible in combat, for example, if I'm fighting a boss and it's just a single boss, and that boss then starts to channel a spell on someone in the party, I can then pop out Heart of the Wild and cast Convoke the Spirits and get some huge damage off, which obviously just helps get the boss down quicker. It feels really fun for me because it's quite dangerous. I feel quite cheeky just popping out and going into Moonkin form, smashing the boss down a bit, and then dive back into bear at the last second, so I'm tanky again when the boss turns around to smack me in the face again. That kind of stuff feels fun, and obviously you can pull that off, and it's pretty satisfying to do. So there we go, guys. There's a collection of my thoughts as to why I think tanking is good in this game, and why you should tank in this game despite the difficulties that you will run into sometimes. If either you don't know your stuff, as roots wise, you're going to get groups that flame at you, and it's kind of fair enough because it is up to us to learn the roots as a tank, and it can be stressful if you've got a group that's just not performing very well, or you've got a poor healer and things like that, but that's just issues that we run into from time to time. So if you've never tanked before, or if you have tanked and it's not gone well, I do hope this video has encouraged you to get stuck back in there, because it is very rewarding to play as a tank, and it does feel good, and it can be very fun if you depend on how you play it. So there we go, guys, that's my thoughts. Go on tanking some dungeons and see what you think. Guys, I've been Lazybeast, thanks for watching, I'll catch you next time, take care.